I always have trouble getting back to home after I press the stamp button, so I'm not an
Probably
Apple
under
person.
there.
Let's go down as well. Maybe it's
All right, I think we've got 6 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and call on Councilman Hensley to lead us off in prayer.
Lord, teach us to be generous. Teach us to serve our neighbors as they require, to give of ourselves and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for a reward, except to know that we are applying our best judgment and efforts to the betterment of our community. And we pray for our neighbors who work to secure and protect our public safety, who put themselves between danger and the rest of us day and night. We are grateful for them and for all that they do to keep us safe. And for all of the unspoken intentions of those assembled here this evening, we say, Amen.
Excellent. I think we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and do a roll call.
Deacon,
Here.
Fitzwater,
Present.
Hensley,
Present.
Kimna,
Here.
Lester,
Here.
Schreiber, Spencer,
Present.
Spicer,
Present.
Ward,
Here.
Wiseman.
Present.
Excellent. That takes us to item 3, adoption of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Or a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Item 4, miscellaneous. We have a proclamation for Project Homeless Connect. And I know we have some representatives here, so we invite you to the microphone and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
If you could just identify yourself and your
Sure.
cohorts there.
Absolutely. I'm Karen Taylor. I'm one of the pastors of First United Methodist Church, and I'm also the co-chair of this year's Project Homeless Connect. Stephanie Thompson, Shelley Hittner, Anna Holt, and Melissa Lee, who is our other co-chair. Very good. And we want to just say thank you to this body for recognizing the work of Project Homeless Connect with this proclamation, and we are so grateful for the support that you have shown us over the last 8 years that we have hosted Project Homeless Connect. And if you're not familiar, Jefferson City Project Homeless Connect is a one-day event based on a national model to reduce barriers, as many barriers as possible for those experiencing homelessness or are housing vulnerable, and to take a next step into becoming housing secure. This year, over 60 service providers, agencies, churches, nonprofit organizations, and businesses are coming together to offer supportive services to our guests that we serve. And we are preparing for 200 guests who are experiencing homelessness or housing vulnerable, and we are looking for over 100 volunteers to serve as tour guides and additional volunteers to provide assistance in other ways throughout the event. And this event is possible because of the financial donations of businesses, churches, and individuals, and donations of goods and services, and the work of our planning team, which is much larger than the group here. And some of the services provided on the event include basic medical screening, dental extractions, vision screening and eyeglasses, birth certificates, non-driver ID cards, housing, counseling and placement, employment services, access to benefits, including Medicaid and food stamps, substance use and mental health counseling, veterans benefits and services, bus passes, haircuts, showers, hot lunch, and clothing vouchers for the Salvation Army thrift store. Plus, they get a backpack filled with personal hygiene items and other essentials. And so that's a big part of what this event does, but it also serves as an opportunity to raise awareness for the need of housing in our community and to hear about barriers to those who are seeking to be housed. obstacles, as we hear, are many, and addressing those needs are complex. And we know there's not a simple solution. This event doesn't address all those needs, but it's a piece of it. And we know that it'll take the whole community working together to create safe, affordable housing for all of our citizens. And so we would like to invite the council especially, but anybody who's listening, to come and be a part of Project Homeless Connect. In fact, we brought some t-shirts. Did we bring the t-shirts up? We have t-shirts for our council if you would like a t-shirt to be come and be a part of the event. We invite you to come and just see what's happening, how the community is coming together for this event. It's Friday, September 30th from 10 to 2. And if you want to find out more, our website is www.jcmo-phc.org. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate all you do in our community. And does anyone else have any comments? I know Ann had a piece of paper there. Do you have any?
We are just going to hand these out to
Perfect.
everybody, just a flyer promoting our event on the 30th.
Well, we do have the proclamation. The mayor apologizes that she's not here. She's on other business, but you hit most of the high points in the whereases. I was just going to mention a couple of them. I won't
Okay.
read all of them. You talked about the fact that there are 2 million across the country. The thing that really struck me as you were speaking, I was kind of looking through the whereas, is the partnership between the faith community, government, the community. So it truly is a community need, obviously, and project. But I will read the therefore, and again, this on behalf of the mayor. So I, Kerry Turgeon, mayor of the city of Jefferson, do hereby proclaim September 30th, 2022 as Project Homeless Connect Day in Jefferson City. So congratulations. We hope to be able to celebrate with you on that day. And in the honor of the mayor, and I think someone else wanted a picture.
Yeah.
If you guys
we
want to
would
come up
love-
front, we'll get a
Sure.
picture, and we'll have the council come behind us. We'll get the shirts distributed, we'll have all those up.
Good. It was.
Again, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll try to keep September 30th marked on our calendar. That takes us to item number 5, the public hearing, and Ms. Donaldson is going to read the bill, and then we will do the staff report, and then we'll open it for a public hearing. So.
2022-61, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson approving a PUD plan amendment for property located at 311 Bolivar Street.
All right, and Mr. Sanders, are you doing the staff report, or Mr. Barron?
Mr. Barron's going to, since he did it last time, is well versed with it. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And so up on the screen is the property that this council bill pertains to. The property is highlighted in blue there in the center of the screen. It is zoned a PUD, a planned unit development zoning district. And this slide shows the aerial photography for the area. It is an old air photo prior to having a building recently constructed on the property. It was essentially a graveled lot. A few things I'll point out on this this air photo is presence of a railroad, so railroad and railroad right-of-way just to the east of the property. And the property owner for the application for this PUD plan amendment, additionally, that property acquired this triangular piece of property from the railroad. Did that essentially during after the final plans for this particular project were approved, but before construction started. So that occurred in that property transfer occurred in September of 2021. A few other things I'll point out here is the alley, West Wall Way. This is not working well. So West Wall Way, located just to the north, adjacent to this property, and then also Fire Station number 1 is located in the upper right-hand corner of the screen there. So this is the preliminary PUD plan that was approved by the council in October of 2020. And so to orient you, Bolivar Street is at the top of the screen, and Bacardi Street is on the left-hand side of the screen. So you see the railroad going down the left-hand side of the screen as well. And the PUD plan is fairly simple in its layout, showing the building that was proposed at the time, and then 2 parking lots, a larger parking lot with access off of Bolivar Street, and then a small parking lot with access off of Wall Way, the alley. The use for the building is as a coffee shop and roastery. And there's also a single Airbnb or apartment unit located in the building. Within the council ordinance that approved this PUD plan, there were some specific restrictions on the alley, namely that it would be designated as no parking, and that the owner of this property would not allow for parking in or blocking of the alley. So that was a condition that was contained within the ordinance approving the PUD plan. So this bill would amend that PUD plan. So up on the screen is the final PUD plan on the left-hand side of the screen. This plan was approved administratively at the city staff level as is permitted within the zoning code. And it shows 4 parking spots located in a small parking lot with access off of the alley. And a few items I'll point out. There's a concrete curb located right here. So Bolivar Street is at the top of the screen, and the alley right here. And then a concrete curb with 2 spaces pointing toward Bolivar Street, and then 2 spaces going the opposite direction, one of them handicapped with the striping separating the parking spot from the alley. And so a small parking lot with access from the alley. On the right-hand side of the screen is the proposed amendment, which would includes 8 head-end parking spots off of the alley, one of them a handicap parking spot. This is a street view of the back of the building, and so that is West Wall Way on the left-hand side of the screen, and the parking lot as it was constructed. It was not constructed according to the approved final PUD plan, namely in that the concrete island was not installed. And so this proposed amendment to the PUD plan was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their meeting on August 11th. Their vote was a recommendation for approval on a vote of 7-1, and they attached 1 condition to that recommendation, and that is that signage indicating the rear parking area would be for employees and tenants only be installed. And the discussion at the P&Z level is that that would consist of probably a single sign located in this dirt area about right there, pointing toward the alley to indicate that that area is for parking for employees and tenants only. So that condition is contained within this council bill that is before you. And the bill does have a negative staff recommendation. I'll try to lay that out for you. Namely that the development is a typically high traffic use, a coffee shop, and that increasing reliance on the use of the alley, West Wall Way, to support the operations would be a detriment to the public, who relies on this alley for provision of emergency services associated with Fire Station 1. With that, I'd rely on the fire department to give you any details on the operations of Fire Station 1. Or answer any questions the council may have.
Any comments at this point?
I would just reiterate that our concerns remain the same and have been from the beginning. There's a couple things to note. You know, the operation at Fire Station 1 is somewhat dynamic. It ebbs and flows based on activities in the area downtown. We use this back lot area for many uses. We use it for staging of equipment. We use it for boat response and storage. We use it for breathing air, compressor, access. So there's many different uses to that. We have temporarily been able to relocate the boat during construction because some of the concerns that we've had about construction access, but that is not a permanent solution. So we know that all of our equipment location areas here are very, for us, very sparse, and the real estate is very small. So every bit of square inch of this building is utilized for emergency response, and that's why we really would like to be able to mark this alley as a fire lane. To do that, that is part of the original PUD agreement, is that we were able to not only put signage up, but also stripe and paint the curb. And so that's part of the reason the curb was an essential element of that original compromise with the owner of the property, so that it could be utilized as a fire lane, which was discussed and from the very beginning if we were to allow access off the alley. Happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Mr. Barron?
No.
Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Councilwoman
For
Ford.
Fire Chief. Would the response time be quicker for water rescue if the boat was housed at the airport versus this side of the river?
The challenge for us is that we have two boats that are typically stored here, and one of those is primarily one that's used on the river. It's a more of a rigid hull boat. The other boat is a inflatable, an IRB, an inflatable rescue boat, and so that's the boat that we use for a lot of the smaller, quicker response areas. So when the intersection of the expressway and Broadway floods, which is pretty typical when we get a flash flood event, just down the street from Station 1, this is the boat that we use for that. It's more of a smaller waterways, more of a flash flood type scenario, although we do use it on the river as well. So there's two boats at Station 1, and typically the one that goes down below and what will be the future, the permanent location has been for many, many years, is the inflatable rescue boat down in the basement. So the airport is an option. The challenge with the airport is we have to have a tow vehicle also. So we're typically moving a tow vehicle into position quickly and then attaching to the boat and then deploying the boat. So there's a lot of moving parts that have to happen very quickly when we deploy the boat out of the basement.
And a follow-up regarding the curb painting, striping. There is a curb there. I mean, would that being painted help in any way?
I think the concern is that it's visible as you approach. And so in the past, the reason the Chapter 13 of the City Code, which speaks to fire lanes and our ability to designate fire lanes, when we've written tickets in the past, the judge has thrown out those tickets if we don't have all those elements in place. The painted curb that's conspicuously visible and has a clear demarcation, and the signage. So signage alone is not enough sometimes when we write those tickets and try to enforce fire lanes. The other issue there, I think, is from a general perspective when we were having these conversations, is that it would require whoever is parking in that area to then face out when they pull back onto the alley, which gives people, I guess, a greater sense of awareness of what's occurring in the alleyway, but also a better sight distance. So both those things in combination were the discussion points that led us to that agreed upon compromise in the PUD.
Sorry. Could this alley be widened? I mean, it looks like there's utility poles there to the left. Could there be another entrance to the back of the fire station? I
It's a-
mean, I
it's a
know
good
that's
question. Yeah.
costs, but
And it's really, there's about, and I might defer a little bit to Public Works here, but there's multiple utilities there, and it's maybe hard to see, it's definitely hard to see the elevation difference here, but there's a pretty drastic elevation difference from the entrance off of Bolivar into that lower lot. So there's a hill essentially to go over, but then we have gas lines, and we also have electrical service, and I believe even a box in all in that area, so that would all have to be relocated.
All set? Great. We are going to have an opportunity for questions after we close the public hearing, so, but no, that was fine there, but if something else comes up. So I do think we'll open the public hearing, and we have slotted up to 10 minutes for the applicant if there's anybody that would like to speak on behalf of this project. Welcome.
May I ask in advance for more than 10 minutes? I didn't see any, I'm sorry, I didn't see any limitation on anything that I got. I saw the limitation on public input on some of the later stuff. And
You also get 5 minutes to close. Does that help?
it will help.
Sir, how much time do you think you'll need? I'm over here.
I'm sorry.
How much time do you think you'll need?
Frankly, 30 minutes.
Okay. Motion to increase the applicant's speaking period to 30 minutes.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And I'll try to move through this as quickly as I can.
All right, sir. Just introduce yourself and then.
Jeff Shaper-Cutter. My wife and I are the owners of Capital Opportunity Fund, which owns this property. We have filed this application and are bringing it to you this evening. We also, my wife and I also own Oak Brook Properties, which is a separate entity which acquired the property immediately to the east of this property from the Union Pacific Railroad. We set out to build a very nice building in a area of town which has seen significant improvement over the last couple of years. We've been involved in that improvement because we also own the building directly, the gray building directly across from the railroad tracks here and in front of Big Whiskey, and have owned that for 3 or 4 years. We're proposing this amendment on the number of spaces and the orientation of those spaces because from the very beginning we felt that increasing the number of spaces for on-site, off-street parking here would enhance public safety, not diminish it. We have become more firmly convinced of that since the business opened, and the morning experience there has shown the traffic and parking on Bolivar Street is more than we had anticipated. This shows an aerial view of the property, both our property and the fire department's property, with the triangular section shown directly at the bottom. We took upon this project, and that was a steady slope from fire department level down to the railroad tracks, about a 13 or 14% elevation change between Wallway and the railroad tracks. We removed 1,500 cubic yards of dirt and fill from the area to build this building. We moved that onto the adjoining railroad lot, which was part of the reason we wanted that railroad lot. And subsequently, the city, and we appreciate this, the city has approved an agreement with us to kind of level out our area of that 1,500 cubic yards of dirt and put it into some of the lower areas on Jefferson City's property. And Mr. Kroll, thank you again for agreeing to do that. But on this, well, it's all the same screen. Wow, that's crazy. On this screen, doesn't really show the way I would. Okay, this is better. Boy, nice gadget here. This shows the fire department's property on the left where it says Fire Station Number 1. It also shows the separate property which it acquired from the Jeff City Housing Authority July of 2021, I think. So right now the fire department owns or Jeff City owns everything between Bolivar Street and the High Street Viaduct and the railroad tracks down below. We continue to own in two different entities that coffee shop place as well as the Union Pacific property. You know, and one of the thoughts, frankly, that I'm going to share with you later is that we really think that the fire department and Jefferson City have their obligation on their own property to deal with their emergency access needs. They have that property. They have those resources. And accessing any emergency needs across the back of that property, perhaps eliminating their own pull-in parking spaces north of Wallway and giving greater utilization or adding parking spaces up where that upper parking lot is in the northwest corner of Bolivar and High Street. The city has the resources to provide emergency needs on their own. And frankly, when they take when we bought this property, we had all those nice title insurance things done, and guess what? It didn't show that there was any impingement upon our ownership rights to Wallway, and that's what the city is doing here, diminishing our property rights to frankly not only the coffee shop property, which is again owned by the applicant here, but also to the Union Pacific property, and we again believe that we're enhancing the value, the safety of the property to the traveling public. From the very beginning, and I went over this the other night, and I'm sorry to raise it again, but city staff misled us on this parking issue. They told us point blank that an application with pull-in parking from an alley would not be approved. It was pointed out to me that I should not have taken their word for that at the time. I did, to my regret, and here we are now. It doesn't surprise me, frankly, from seeing the tone of the meeting last 2 weeks ago, that some of you that the city was successful at poisoning the well with regard to our application. It doesn't matter that there are, in fact, 2 boats at Fire Station 1, and that both of those boats, from what I can tell, from visual observation, are located on the same trailer and have been on the main bay of the Fire Department Station Number 1 for, one person told me 15 years. Chief says this summer. There are 2 skis in that, two jet skis, in that lower area. Apparently never, we understand, never used for any emergency need, but taken out for training occasionally. The fire department continues to talk about access to this communications tower, which is really a tower leased to, I think, AT&T. Fire department gets $25,000 a year for that lease, if my reading of the lease is correct. That money could easily be used to fund the fire department, our Jefferson City's we think, legal obligation to provide for their own emergency access needs. West Wall Way is a public alley, not exclusively for the use of the fire department, but totally used by them for the last 35 or 40 years, probably. The city actually owned this lot in the 1980s, acquired it from the Jeff City Housing Authority, and I think with the promise that they were going to build their fire training station on that site where you now see our building. Instead, they decided to build that facility down on Hyde Park or Heisinger Road, whatever that is over there. And the Housing Authority asked the city to deed it back to them. In 1980, it would have been so simple for a fire department who had serious concerns about emergency access on West Wall Way to have vacated West Wall Way. Housing Authority wouldn't have cared. It just could have been done. It would be difficult now to get West Wall Way vacated. We would certainly object. But that ability was there for the city for 36 years. From 1976, when they acquired the adjoining property, to 2022, and the city never elected to vacate the alley. It would be easy for me to stand here and say, I wish they had, because then I wouldn't have to be in this position. They didn't. And here we are. The position of the city staff regarding this interpretation of the ordinance hasn't changed from the first time we met with the city back 2 years ago. Consistently, they have said that pull-in parking from an alley wasn't permitted. They've changed that a little bit today to now say that city ordinances don't support pull-in parking from alleys. You know, I get that difference. Prohibit, permit, support. It's a critical difference. And at the Planning and Zoning Commission, one of the commissioners, or actually two of the commissioners, picked up on that difference. At the city council meeting on September 6th, one of the city council members here picked up on that distinction. One of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners, which Planning and Zoning Commission was pretty roundly criticized by one of the councilmen last week, 2 weeks ago. One of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners called the city ordinance interpretation a pretext, not the real reason. Frankly, I think, I like Eric. I think he was told, come up with a reason to support the fire department on this. Come up with a reason. And being the good city employee that he is, he came up with a reason. Now, it just so happens that that reason was exposed not by two Planning and Zoning Commission members and not by a city councilman, but by the city's own actions. Because as I told you 2 weeks ago, 3 months before we were told that we could not have pull-in parking from a city alley, a major development right across the street got approval of a plan from the planning department for, guess what? 8, count them, pull-in parking spaces on an alley. I just happened to walk down Wall Way a half a block in the other direction toward the west, and Loggers has a nice sun solar system there with 15 parking spaces, half of which are pull-in parking spaces from an alley. A changed interpretation in those 3 months? Maybe a more favored development? Maybe a more sensitive need from a public safety perspective? And that's what I want to concentrate on next. I jokingly, this thing has been a painful experience for me, to be honest with you. That meeting 2 weeks ago, I was personally subjected to name calling and insults. And unfortunately, words do matter. Guess who saw all those comments? It doesn't matter to you probably, but it matters to me when my wife and children and grandchildren get to see that kind of stuff directed at me. This is not about public safety. With all due respect to Chief Schofield, who again, he and I have had some great conversations. This is not about public safety. If it were truly about public safety, the fire department would have done something 36 years ago or 4 years ago to get rid of the problem that we are presenting to the fire department. It's not about public safety. They can move the boats anywhere they want to move them. They can situate. If you drive by that fire station anytime with the doors open, you'll see that that boat, actually both boats on the same trailer, are easily situatable, is that a word even, within those 4 huge bays of the fire department. And frankly, for Chief Schofield to come now and say that, well, yeah, we're going to probably move some of that, probably that little boat back downstairs. Look at that photo, and I guess I've got one of these. That's where they're going to move it. What do you see there? Maybe nothing, but I see a truck parked within 3.5 feet of where those boats would have to come out. There have been as many as 10 cars and trucks, private, probably employees' vehicles, and commercial vehicles parked in that back area right there. Frequently another 5 fire department vehicles parked in that pull-in parking space off the alley. That parking space up there, right then, at this point, it has 1 vehicle in it. Frequently, there are no vehicles in there. This isn't about public safety. And any claim that it is frankly almost, with all due respect, laughable. This is a turf war. And guess who's going to win the turf war? The city's going to win it. Chief and I have had some very frank conversations with each other. About a year ago, he came to me and said that, yeah, when the Housing Authority put this property up for sale, as soon as he found out about it, he contacted the Housing Authority and asked them to take it off the cell block. They told him no. He didn't say he was unhappy about that. He didn't complain about it. He just told me that he tried to get the Housing Authority not to sell this. About 6 months later, he and I were supposed to meet up there, and he came from a meeting at the Fire Museum, and the previous chief was there, and he reported to me that the previous chief, his predecessor, had said to him, "How did you let that building get built there?" This has always been fire department property, accessory to fire department property. Their vehicles have been parked there, employees' vehicles, whatever, have been parking in that open parking space for years. They've always treated that as their property. And frankly, the sale, even to well-intentioned, I think my wife and I were well-intentioned, people who were willing to invest in that area, got in the way. This isn't about public safety. It's about turf. We are intruding. We're interlopers. That's all we are. We're in the way. They don't want us to use West Wall Way at all. They don't want us to use West Wall Way for any purpose. And by the way, you know, Chief, we have no problem with you. I did an open records request of the city, and I got some emails. Some of them were redacted, interestingly. But one of the emails from Chief Schofield said that this bill doesn't provide for a fire lane. My reading of the city code is that the fire chief can designate any lane in the city of Jefferson as a fire lane. the fact that this new bill doesn't say that it's a fire lane, and frankly, if somebody from the city had called me up and said, Jeff, we've got a problem with this bill as it's written, as it's been proposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We got a problem with it. It doesn't designate as fire lane. You know what I would have said? Put the fire lane designation in there. Paint the curbs any way you want to. Put a divider. Frankly, I would be fine with a cone divider down West Wall Way. On the one side for egress reasons, on the other side, I'm phasing through some of this stuff now. I want to show you this. This is the property, and that doesn't show anything very much, except it shows you the property. Another view of the property in back. Those I think pickup. Those pictures were taken today, and trash pickup is tomorrow, I believe, in that area. The trash pickup is kind of an interesting thing. Councilman Fitzwater last week mentioned about how they'd been such good neighbors to us. Well, initially the reaction to this whole bill was you can't have your trash receptacles in the back of the building because they have to be accessed on West Wall Way. You have to put your trash receptacles, this is would be a pretty sight. You have to put your trash receptacles in front of the building. Now, when I pointed out that right down past that big pickup truck on the left there is the fire department's own trash receptacle, and that the trash company had to access West Wall Way every week to get the fire department's trash, I asked kind of jokingly, can we use the fire department's trash receptacle as our own, or can we put our trash receptacle by the fire department's? Then city staff came back to me. This wasn't Eric, by the way. Came back to me and said, yeah, we've looked at that. We realize that our own trash truck trash stuff is back there and has to be picked up every week. Go ahead and we're going to allow you to put your trash receptacle in the back of the building. I want to deal head on too with a couple of accusations that were leveled at me personally at that meeting. Two councilmen at that meeting made comments that require me to respond. One called me a bully. Thank you. And said I deliberately striped 8 spaces in that back parking lot in willful disregard of the approved plan. If the councilman had actually visited the project site and not just blindly relied upon the assertions of city staff or his own interpretation of what the city staff said, he would know that those spaces were never striped, have not been. And who was at that meeting that said they hadn't been striped? The mayor and another city councilman and 2 fire department people were at a meeting at that very place on 1:30 of the afternoon of September 6th. They saw that property had not been striped. Did any of them tell Councilman, I'm sorry, I just promoted you, or demoted perhaps, Councilman Deacon, that property had not been striped? All 3 of those people were at this meeting, and not a single one of them confronted Councilman Deacon as he was, frankly, slandering. The barriers were put up. They should have noticed the absence of any striping, and that they were unwilling to challenge or correct the councilman. And neither did Mr. Barron challenge him. Mr. Barron was also at that meeting on September 6th. He knew that those stripes had not been painted, and to stand by and let that go unchallenged fit the city's scenario perfectly. Cast me as the bad guy, a bully. You still believe that? Yeah, good. They were willing to let that go. And that says more about that situation than I really need to any longer. Councilman Deacon went on to call me a bully and acting willful. What's the word? Then from the side, presumably another councilman added, disregard. I love it when these things are on TV because you can actually go back and look. Most of those comments were made when I was not even here. Councilman Deacon is my councilman. He farmed his position early enough to have called me. He was so upset at the previous meeting that the city staff had not advised him of those housing developments. And yet, he was willing to take into me without even asking me what was going on. Eric knew from the beginning that there was ongoing construction on that site. When he first told me that he had noticed that there was no island put there, I explained to him that we were still in construction. The city no parking fire lane signs were actually put all the way, I think there were 3 of them put along that on our side of the property line. Mr. Barron also, when Councilman Deacon asked that night about this willful violation, he also asked Mr. Barron, "Is that true?" And rather than Mr. Barron simply reporting that there had been active discussions about the ongoing construction, which was Eric's and my conversation, he chose to respond that the island had not been installed on purpose. And I know each of you will have your own interpretation of his response, but here's mine. Councilman Deacon's false and inflammatory comments fit perfectly into the city's scenario. He could not answer truthfully, and he intentionally chose to respond with an answer that added further, pardon my pun, fuel to the fire. Councilman Deacon's comments with regard to the Planning and Zoning Commission require noting. Using such terms as willy-nilly, the rule of law, getting a thick enough skin, and getting some guts has denigrated that commission. And who stood up to challenge him? And why not? Because it fits the city's desired scenario. Throw attention away from the real issue. Those members are volunteers, as I understand, and receive no compensation for their service. Those derogatory comments directed at the Planning and Zoning Commission by a councilman were out of line, in my opinion, and a blemish on that meeting. Okay. How much time do I have? Because I don't want to run over.
About 5.5 minutes.
Okay. Councilman Fitzwater's comments at that meeting brought this to another level. Remember that he had said he was at that back alley meeting with the mayor early on the afternoon of the 6th. He said he wanted to echo the words of Councilman Deacon. Then he said I had willfully violated the PUD plan and knew what I was doing was wrong. Where was Mr. Barron to say that we were merely following the direction that he had given us by filing the application to amend the PUD? Do I need to assure the councilman that every penny on this project has been spent at our cost? And when you indicated, Councilman, that that parking lot needed to be put into place at our own cost, I chuckled. Frankly, that was a fairly shallow, perhaps weak, but typical of me attempt to save money. I knew that we were filing this amendment. I knew it was going to cost $700 to put that island in there, that curb in there. I knew it was going to cost me $300 or $400 probably to stripe it with 4 spaces in that handicap space. I knew that the city wasn't going to give me a permanent occupancy certificate until I had that done, and I filed this application. I knew that if I was successful with the application, that I would just have to rip out that island and take off the painting and repaint it. I'm going to assure you that island is simple to erect. The failure to put it in was not any attempt to violate the PUD. Rather, it was an attempt, weak perhaps, on my part to save money. The councilman says he has visited the site with the fire chief and the mayor. Another fire department official was there as well. I wish that I had just been invited. Just invited. As it is, I can only speculate on the conversation, but I don't need to have too much of an imagination as to what the fire officials may have reported to the mayor and the councilman. I really believe that September 6th meeting was orchestrated by the staff. They knew I wasn't going to be here, probably. Saw my name on the, knew I wasn't here. Those council persons who took the most negative position at our pre-hearing discussion were those, among those who complained most vigorously that the staff had failed to alert them much earlier about those pending developments. And I'm giving some, but not much perhaps, credit for the tension of that evening. Most of what has, because of what has transpired at the September 6th meeting, I have really low expectations of success for this ordinance's passage. Why am I here? Maybe it's just a principle matter for me. I'm cognizant of the interesting relationship between the fire department and the other city departments. The self-interest in this whole thing is undeniable. Maybe that is why it is so hard to fight City Hall. Here's our suggestion about how this matter might be resolved. If the city claims an emergency access need over a public way, the city has an obligation to determine if that emergency access can be satisfied in a way other than restricting the use of that public way. When the city has the resources, both in real estate and money, to provide for that alternate emergency access, whether they do it over that little steep grade that is right off the back alley, or over their existing paved pull-in parking off of West Wallway, widening perhaps West Wallway. The city was forced, the city agreed to move utilities back when they entered into that 25-year lease with the tower company on that tower site. They moved city utilities then. They can move them again. And when the city has those resources and doesn't use the resources to provide their own emergency access over property, frankly, that they already have, that constitutes a taking of my property without compensation. Pure and simple. Shake your heads. I'm sorry. That's my feeling. And Jane said, Jeff, should we just quit on this? She's the more pragmatic of us.
We're at 30 minutes, so if
And
you
I'm done.
can just kind
Oh.
of to wrap up your.
Applauding my wife's pragmatism is a perfect way to end.
All right. Questions of Councilman Hensley?
Thank you. I'll start with just some comments and observations. Thank you for being here tonight. I believe that people should hold themselves and be held by others to agreements that they freely choose to enter. Right. I also believe, though, that government at all levels, both as institutions and through the conduct and communications of their employees, owe it to each and every one of us to treat members of the public honestly, fairly, and respectfully. Here, we have an applicant who agreed to a parking design in the back of their building, but has not to this point acted entirely in accordance with that agreement, and is now asking us to amend the agreement to conform with what they would prefer to do. I think that's fair at this point, right? But at our last meeting, and since then, two things have been confirmed. First, city staff told the applicant in some form or fashion that city code would not allow head-in parking from this alleyway, or from any alleyway, in a manner I take that communicated that that was a non-negotiable point. It was, the request was dead on arrival because of city code is how I've interpreted your comments and the other comments I've heard so far. The second thing that's been confirmed glaringly and repeatedly now is that no such prohibition or discouragement, whatever that means when it comes to codes, actually exists in our city code. So we have a resident who has chosen not to comply with an agreement provision which we deceived him into accepting in the first place. In my book, that is at least a tie. And in this type of infuriating situation, I will always break that tie in favor of the resident and against the government. This is exactly the type of petty nonsense that rightfully and tragically causes people to lose faith one incident at a time in their governmental institutions, and we have to stomp it out every time we find it, or else it goes back and hides under a rock until the next time. Sir, the city owes you some apologies.
Thank you.
Absolutely. First, of course, you and your family deserve an apology for how you've been treated during this process. With respect to this parking design issue, you know, that stretching the truth and well-intentioned white lies are still unacceptable forms of dishonesty. That's what I tell my kids anyway. I hope that's still true of adults and certainly of governments. Second, this council owes you an apology for how you were treated so disrespectfully and imprudently last time you were here. I am sorry for how you were treated by this body. So not only should we grant your request for an amendment, though I agree that the alleyway certainly has to remain clear, that we should paint, mark, sign the heck out of the thing, paint the whole thing neon red, you know, and that really no mercy should be shown to any vehicle that is in the alleyway improperly. But I think it's only right that we also refund you the application fee that you had to submit in order to go through all of this fun. And I'll save that for a little later. But, you know, when we do wrong by someone, we have to acknowledge it and then do what we can to try to fix it. These are simple principles. So thank you and your family for all that you are doing to better our community. This is an impressive and gorgeous building.
Thank you.
And I know that you all are already and will continue to be very successful there. And we appreciate it, and we owe you thanks for that. I apologize again for how things have transpired, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Other comments, Councilman Schreiber?
I listened very intently at the last council meeting. And you know, there's a time to speak and a time to listen. And due to the temperature in the room at that time, that was a time to listen. But I've done a lot of evaluation of this situation, and I've looked at it, and I am quite familiar with both the fire station number 1 and with the 3-story coffee. And Mr. Shaper-Cotter brought up an interesting point a while ago, which I'll have to agree with, is that when we talk about the issue of public safety, the issue really isn't the alley. The issue now are the cars that are parked on both sides of Bolivar Street in the morning, when the mornings that I'm down there, which is quite frequently, fire apparatus comes down Bolivar Street a great deal and crosses McCarty and then goes on to where they need to go. So I've observed that when there's somebody coming up Bolivar Street and a big piece of fire apparatus is going down and you have cars parked on both sides, that presents a potential hazard for everybody involved. Just looking at the wallway, just from what we see right here, I see no problem with vehicles parking back there, particularly when you look at where the alley ends on the side there and where the property for 3-Story Coffee is. So if we say we can't have head-end parking, then does that apply to everybody? Does that apply to the head-end parking where you see the pickup truck and where many mornings there are a number of cars up there that are parked with fire station number 1? So that would probably be head-end parking as well, coming off Wallway. So does that mean that that isn't also does not apply to the fire department? And it is true that the fire apparatus, the boats, have been parked up in the bay almost all summer. They were still there. And quite frankly, I don't see that there should be that big of a problem with us allowing parking there. Now, for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can speak for the integrity of the city officials, particularly the fire chief. I think he's a person with a great deal of integrity. I know he is. I can also say that knowing Jeff Japercotter and his wife personally, that they're people with a great deal of integrity as well. I don't for 1 second question their integrity. I think it's too bad that this whole situation has gotten as far as it has. And I think we should erect some signs there that say no parking fire lane. And if we need to put something somewhere that we stripe in red, then we could do that. But I see no problem with there being parking allowed up behind the building. And it is true that there was never any striping done back there. It has not been done. So that's my position. And I think we need to think this through very carefully. And I think that we need to make the right decision. And my decision at this time would be to allow for there to be parking behind 3-Story Coffee.
Thank you, sir. Other comments, questions, Councilman Spencer?
First off, thank you for making the investment in the neighborhood. I think it's a
We're
wonderful building. And
we're really proud of it.
yeah, you should be. I just would like to ask for some clarification
Okay.
here. You stated earlier, and correct me if, make sure I heard you correctly. Was your intention initially to always have head-in parking? I mean, that was your first choice or preference?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Can I find it? Dang on it. What did I do, Eric? Oh, back. Oh, no. Okay. There's a chart here that shows the very first. It's here, and I'm going to find it. This was our very first. Nope. Eric, I did send that to you, didn't I? The very first PUD site plan that was drawn up by CMPS for us was showed 8 spaces in the back of the pull-in parking, 8 spaces in the back. I think that was that very first one I sent, Eric. At any rate, that's the 8 spaces that we took. It's almost identical to the plan and the amendment, but that's the 8 space request that we had when we first did that CMPS PUD plan that we took to the city council and took to the city staff and kind of got.
And from your words, you said that the staff had said that it would not be approved.
Such
Correct?
a plan would not be approved.
Such a plan would not be approved. What is, Eric, what does your definition of approved mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that property owner is referring to an initial pre-meeting that was held in 2020. Okay. There were numerous staff there at that meeting. Okay. The overriding topic was always impact on emergency services, with the concerns primarily coming from the fire department. The Public Works Department is responsible for connections to the right-of-way. Things like curb cuts are processed through that department.
Excuse me though, but you're not answering the question though.
Yep.
Define approved for me in the city's context. If you want me to answer it, I can. What I'm conjecturing on is approved. What I would see as that you guys would not approve it based on your preferences, not necessarily code, but preference. Your preference would be no
If I
head
may
parking.
caution the council that the planning division's responsible for bringing this application through a certain process, through the Planning and Zoning Commission. A lot of duties fall upon me to relay information, but this is not the planning division that has sole recommendation to the council on this matter. When talking of the word approved, it's not the planning division. There are multiple departments that I think need to be looked at here. And again, the primary area of concern came from the fire department, impacts on the fire station, and the right-of-way connections.
Can we call on Mr. Morash? I think he had a comment
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, and this is very, no situation's typical. I did try to clarify it a little bit or send out just to improve on the knowledge of the process through an email last week. But basically, any connection to the right-of-way, number one, it's supposed to be limited to 40 feet in width. That's the maximum driveway width. The head-end parking standard doesn't really exist on new development like this. And so just like the front parking lot, all the turning, backing up movements occur within the parking lot. So if you see any new development, they'd all follow that standard. And that's very common in most planned communities. I've worked in multiple ones. And so anyway, so any new development had that restriction. So when we say we're not going to approve that, whether it's planning, fire, whoever, that's a staff level approval. There's always ways, the ultimate way is come to the council to have a code modified or whatever. And especially in this process, the PUD, it allows a lot of variation. Some of it may be less restrictive on the owner. Some of it may be more restrictive. So the PUD process, just kind of takes over the code, if you will, and whatever's on there. Of course, when there's been some examples of things we have approved, and all of those have really been in redevelopment or repaving or dressing up existing areas. And he's exactly right. The loggers building, they just redid theirs. It was kind of an old lot, but it already existed, so we just left it alone and let them rehab it. Same with across the road, Big Whiskey's. That area there's a piece of right-of-way through the parking lot. It was all gravelled up, and so they wanted to pave it, and so we just allowed it to be paved. And so that's this process. So any code can be modified by the council. Sometimes there's Board of Adjustments and various ones that can weigh in on that. So that's how that, when we say approve, the staff can't approve that. It violates several codes. And then also when we look at even the redevelopment one, we always look at what's next door, who's using it, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, of course, the fire department had a lot of concerns, so that's, that weighed heavily on we weren't going to approve it. And even if it would have come with the initial, it probably would have, well, I know it would have, in the initial PUD, Eric would have pointed out that did not meet city code, but was being forwarded anyway. And so after, I guess, and I wasn't in all these meetings, of course, but I tried to pull the city staff, and what I understood was I didn't know there was a disagreement with the property owner. I thought after he and the fire chief spoke that you know, that was an agreeable concession. And so I was kind of unaware until it came up that he objected to that degree.
And you bring up some interesting points. The checks and balances weren't there. I've had issues with some of the planning and zoning, especially when it came to Sam's, that issue, and some others. But it's always based on interpretation of the code. And I've even had citizens call me about pools, above ground pools, and saying how the city's going to force them to put a fence around it. And my interpretation was, well, the pool is the barrier. It's 48 inches. That was the barrier. And so it seems like sometimes when you have to force city staff to read a code correctly. And another question I have was, when was the amendment given? When and how far along in your construction process were you when you decided to do the amendment?
Eric pointed out to me, and I think I have an email that says, I think it was in May when he said he noticed that city staff, or he had noticed that the back area looks just like it, and it wasn't completed according to plan. And at that point, I responded to Eric, I believe, by a response email within a day or two, that we had looked at that, had concerned about the variance that we had seen in what was originally told us about pull-in parking from a street and what had been approved right across the street. And then I told Eric that we were going to be filing that amendment. And that amendment actually probably wasn't filed. The application for amendment wasn't filed until July the 11th, I think. Or was it slightly before that, Eric? I'm not sure. Again, but the amendment wasn't actually filed. I had to get some drawings from CMPS and all that kind of stuff. But the amendment wasn't actually filed until July 11th, July 10th, something like that. The construction was still ongoing. We finished the basement first, the basement area that first, and the upstairs wasn't then completed until August, late in August. So construction was still going on.
But concrete was poured already.
Oh, yes.
And that's when he noticed, or someone
Yeah,
on staff.
sometime after, I think with the concrete was poured back in late April, early May.
Because, I mean, to have that island, you would have had to form up curb.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it would have been more noticeable
Oh, yeah.
then if that was going to be done or
Yeah,
not.
and actually the contract, the Rydals were the concrete contractors, and they said it'd be a simple matter for them to come back and put in the island if we need to. And so I asked them, can you just hold off on that then and maybe save me $1,000?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Lester.
So, to me, context matters, and talking about pull-in parking for loggers and pull-in parking here is very different situation. The fire chief has said this poses a safety issue. You're telling us not to believe the fire chief. I really can't do that. And so I really do have a problem with the setup. I also see that there was quite a bit of negotiation before the original PUD, and there was an agreement there, and then apparently you changed your mind and didn't want to go along with that agreement. I also think we're talking about basically four spaces difference here, really. You do have property on the front end that extends a little bit further out. Put spaces there. But anyway, I can't ignore the safety issue with this.
And I'm not asking you to ignore them, Council. I'm asking him to try to assess them. If you look at that back parking lot, I'm getting in dangerous there's 26 feet between the curb in front of that building and where our concrete ends, the property line. The normal parking depth for a parking space is 19 feet, and that's 26 feet. So there's 7 feet. If a person pulls all the way up, there's 7 feet of backing space, and they wouldn't even have to go on to the, now, that's a tight turn for me even. But the utilization of that alley for people backing out can be very minor because of the depth of the parking space itself. And there's no question that there's a difference between this spot and the logger spot. I think that 26 feet of parking area makes up for some of that difference. And again, our fire department people are really, they're trained. I mean, they come out, if they come out of that lot and see somebody that's, they're gonna hit the horn. I think the safety issue is overstated.
Councilmember Ward.
Yes, this is probably for staff. In one of the photos that was shown earlier, I noticed the striping coming out on either side of the alley, the curb striping. It didn't look like it was very long. I was wondering how long it is, how many feet, and how many feet should it be, so there's no parking on either side of that alley to prevent, you know, shouldn't there be, I don't know what the code says. I was trying to dig through our code and find what that length should be on either side of the alley to prevent parking. So when vehicles come out of there, emergency vehicles, they have more of a sight view.
You mean on the street, on Bolivar Street, really?
Yes, on
Yeah,
the street,
okay.
on either side, the curb there on either
Yeah,
side.
off the top of my head, I don't know exactly, but usually
The
it's,
photo only looks like it's about this long.
yeah, usually it's within the curb radius. It's not very much, typically. Now, if there's a complaint, we'd go back and look at it particularly. I think the typical site distance triangle is like 35 feet.
35 feet,
I want
yeah.
to say off the top of my head. But, you know, in downtown, these things get more difficult all the time because you're always trying to, excuse me, balance, you know, what has existed for many years versus new use comes in. Do we need that? I haven't heard that from anybody that they have an issue with it. So, but maybe as uses change and more people, I've heard today that people park up and down the street now, you know, that's something to look into in the future.
So what is the length like that we stripe curbs around stop signs to prevent people from parking next to them? You know, it's the same thing for safety. And if this area is used for emergency vehicles in and out, I would have thought we would have had the curbings, you know.
It's probably been striped that way for many, many years, just like it is, and it hasn't been updated.
Good. Councilman Deacon.
Mr. Schaefer, first of all, I will apologize. My tone was a little harsh the last time. I've spent 19 years, just came off of planning and zoning. And I have been critical, and I will still criticize the present makeup of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They have not seemed to have a good temper of the community like we have in the past. And this, everything I have heard so far is a whining of why you did not get your way. There was negotiation for a long time. I was on planning and zoning when that first came through. I remember discussions about it. It's the most sacred thing we have is a PUD. And you had ample time to give your thoughts, to appeal it. First time through the process, second time through planning and zoning, and even when it came to the council, when they approved it, you should have appealed it then. It was a bully tactic. You're telling everybody he's bad, we're all in cahoots. Well, you maligned our firemen, you maligned the staff, you maligned me. Well, that's fine. I've had 6 daughters. You can't malign me anymore. I got tough skin. I just didn't like the idea that you had a signed agreement and you just didn't like the idea, and you're finding all these reasons why you shouldn't have signed, why it shouldn't be. If I would've seen one reason there that made sense that you got hoodwinked, then I think, well, maybe, but this process, my frustration came with this process should have ended a long time ago. It should have never been here, especially after a signed document. If we're not gonna hold this, we might as well get rid of our planning. Why have rules? If we get somebody, well, I didn't like it because. It wasn't fair. I wanted 4 more parking spots. And I don't like the fire department because they didn't do it. Nobody used the alley, and I want to use it. I just didn't like the tone. If it would have been pleasant, my tone's rough. I don't care. I mean, I'm not here to get people to like me. I'm too old for that. I just didn't like the idea that you signed the document and said, I'm going to do this, and then come to us and say, I don't want to do this. That's my only concern.
Was that a question?
No, that's my
Okay.
statement. I'm going to vote no. That's
Okay,
my feeling.
and I'm not gonna change that, and I'm not gonna even try to. I will say this. When I signed that original PUD application, I was under the impression that anything other than that wasn't gonna be approved. And I'm sorry if I ducked that issue then and chose later to challenge it through an appeal, through an application for an amendment that I have a right to make. I'm sorry.
Councilman Hensley.
Thank you, and I'll just restate the fact, because maybe it's been a long conversation and folks are missing the point of part of this. When city staff makes representations to members of the public on the city's behalf, on this council's behalf, that they know to be false, that should be a big red flag for everybody sitting around this table. And we can't we can't endorse a policy where members of the public have to trust us at their own peril and go and cross-check every single statement made by staff. What I recall from Mr. Shaper-Ketters, am I right? Close? Okay.
Very close.
Sorry, thank you. I'll take very close. What I recall from your first time here a couple weeks ago was that your statement was that staff told you that that the type of parking that you're wanting to do here was prohibited by code. When I asked 2 very simple questions, one was, did someone tell him that? And the other one was, is it true? The first question got a tortured, ring around the rosy, hot potato, duck and dodge of, well, I wouldn't say that exactly. I think what I tell people is that the code discourages it. And then I asked, well, how does the code discourage it? And there was no answer whatsoever. And I haven't been provided an answer in the last 2 weeks. And then that led to the second question of, well, is it true? And of course it's not. So no, when we induce someone's agreement through falsehoods and then come back and try to hold them to every letter of the agreement, I mean, talk about absurd. I'm sorry you're having to waste more of your evening here tonight.
It's okay.
You should just approve this and move on, give you your money back.
You good? Councilman Deacon?
If I may, if this is strictly about that's what he's told wrong, I'd be on your side. But I think from the very, very beginning, first conversation, it was fire department did not want it. That was their code. I mean, their concern. It wasn't an after effect. From the first meetings, the fire department was in on that. And that was, I think he's just trying, if it was any place, I have fought planning on parking. I mean, I've been their worst enemy about parking because they've been so restrictive. If this was strictly because somebody said it, I'd be jumping all over them, and I'd be for you, Mr. Schaefer. But since the fire department had such a good, I even think they cut down some trees so you could have a better view of the Capitol.
No, I paid for that. I paid for those trees to be cut down.
They allowed you to do it just so.
They sure did.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to defer on the issue of safety with the fire department of why it was denied. If it was denied because of some obscure reason that they think, sure, I'm on with 100%, because, yeah, there's issues there we've got to deal with. But on this one, I just think it was just cut and dried, and fire department didn't want it, and all the way through the process, they told them, no, we don't want it, we don't want it, we don't want it, and that's the only argument I heard of why they did not want it in the alley. And now the only argument I hear from Mr. Schaefer is, well, they hoodwinked us. I don't think so. I think it was quite obvious that the fire department was concerned about it.
Councilman Hensley.
A representation was made to the applicant with respect to this particular issue that was untrue. I understand the public safety comments about it, and there are a whole host of things we can do to make use safe and responsible back there. But this has been confirmed. It's not really a matter of debate at this point as to what he was told and the fact that it was false. I suspect that if there were even a shred of truth to the comment, or even a single doubt as to whether it was made to him, that it would have come to light at this point.
I would like to echo the comments of Councilman Hensley. Thank you for coming back first.
You're welcome.
This has been a very frustrating process, not because of you, but just the process. There's one of us that sits with planning and zoning. The other 9 of us are trying to piece this together. As I think has been indicated, we try to do a partnership. I mean, to take away from this that it was personal, I mean, you're welcome to do whatever you want, but I think people were trying to seriously represent with the knowledge that we had. Councilman Schreiber gave really good counsel that listen before we speak. Councilman Hensley did an excellent job of pulling out some of the inconsistencies. I mean, I think what has been tried to be relayed is we take very serious what we agreed to as a city, I mean, and probably jump if it's not adhered to, and you've addressed why you didn't. I mean, it's still a little bit of a frustration point, but I think Councilman Hensley did a great job of why you got to the frustration point that you did. In my opinion, it is very frustrating that we have got here. I agree, we spent probably more time on situation, and again, I mean, I think it's your perfect right to come in here and challenge us on it, and I appreciate you for doing that. And I did go up and take a look at the property. I thought I asked the question. I must not have asked it right, or I misinterpreted the answer. I thought I was told that it had been striped. Now, I know it had not been painted, but I just assumed it was what the road department uses, maybe the stick-on striping. So if I didn't ask that question correctly, but I thought I was told, and again, I may have misinterpreted the answer. Be that as it may, I think we've got two sides that really appreciate private business in this community. It is a beautiful building. I do appreciate you coming in. I only speak for one person at this point. I did have some frustrations, but I should have waited till Councilman Hensley asked his questions, and maybe it would have been redirected. But you and I have been on the same side of issues before, and with me, it's not personal. It's what's best for the city of Jefferson. And again, I appreciate you expanding the time. I'm not sure you could have fit that into 10 minutes, and we're probably a little past 30 minutes.
29 minutes would not have let me applaud my wife for her pragmatism.
But anyway, any other council member have question? We will open it up. I'm guessing there's no opposition to this from the public, but we will continue the public hearing. But any other questions of the applicant before? Is there anyone here in the public that would like to speak in opposition to the applicant's request, or anybody speaking, well, first, anybody in opposition? Anyone else here to speak in support of? All right, that will close the public hearing on this issue.
If you don't mind, I just have one quick thing to say. That is the following.
Come up and just identify yourself because we're trying
My
to.
name is Wayne Lee. I spent 38 years at the state capitol as a disability and civil rights advocate. And in those 38 years, I ended up spending a lot of time walking into legislators' offices, speaking to them privately, also speaking before committees like this. And when I did, I found myself often wondering, what exactly are we going to do? Nobody seems to want to negotiate or work together. All we ever have are conflicts, arguments, disagreements. We never get any place. And I finally found a few people, though, that I could talk with. One of them was named Bill Deacon. Bill Deacon was our state representative in this district for a long time. And I walked into Bill Deacon's office, and I would often speak with him. One time I was in there, and I ended up talking to Bill, shook his hand, and said, well, Bill, it's nice talking to you. Too bad you don't agree with me on this particular bill, but it's nice that we can shake hands, disagree, and agree to disagree, and walk away as friends. And then I finally talked to Bill, and I said, it's great that we can be this way. Finally, he walked up to me one time, tapped me on the shoulder, said, Wayne, would you go ahead and talk for me, speak in support of one of my bills? He told me what it was. I agreed to do that because I agreed with what his bill was. And so I supported it. Many times I had other friends similar to that. We had many, many times when that type of thing would take place because I wanted to be friends with the legislators that I worked with. I learned that as time went on. I even took off the political hat finally. I voted for Carl Vogel as my senator 2 times in a row. And by the way, those of you that don't know, I am a registered Democrat, but that doesn't mean I just vote for Democrats anymore. And I happen to agree very much with John Hensley over here. I think he is very, very accurate in what he was talking about, making sure we work with the public, going ahead and doing what we need to do. Council members up there working with the public, but the public also working with the council members. We've got to do that part too. All of us working together. Because if we don't start doing that, we're going to have to do what happened to me one time not long ago. When I had a seizure, I have epilepsy, uncontrolled seizure activity. I had a seizure out on, one of the grocery stores recently. I had a seizure, landed on the floor. They ended up picking me up, taking me out. They ask you general questions all the time. They asked me who the president was. I said, president? Who needs a president? What we need are some janitors with buckets to get up there and mop up the mess. That's what we need. Everybody else was laughing except that knucklehead. He wasn't laughing at all. He just said, who's the president? And I said, hey, I could care less who the president is. I don't care what party he's with or anything. We just need somebody to get up there and clean up the mess. It doesn't matter who the president is. We just need somebody to get up there and clean up the mess. Well, we're going to need that for sure. I don't care whether it's the city council or over there, up in the Capitol, or right here, unless we go ahead and start working together. And that's what it's going to take. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. I've seen you for years at the Capitol, and I know you volunteer and
Ron.
spend your time. So
I recognize you too.
thank you very much. All right. I think we will go ahead then and close the public hearing. Any other comments from council? Councilman Spencer.
Yeah, just in closing on this issue before we take a vote, I hope this is a learning experience for city staff, and hope that we can take from this and hopefully we can improve our service to the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments? Councilman Hensley?
Let's see, I would make a motion that we refund the applicant the full amount of their application fee, regardless of the outcome of the underlying vote.
Second?
Well, we've got a action item on the table. So let's take care of that, and then I'll come back to you.
You got it.
Any other comments on 2022-061? Ms. Donaldson, would you do a roll call, please?
Deacon,
No.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
No.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Spencer,
No.
Spicer, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman.
No.
It's tied 5-5.
All right. Well, it needs 6 votes to pass. The mayor is not here, so we cannot. So it fails for lack of 6 votes. Councilman Hensley.
Thank you. I move that we refund this applicant the full amount of their application fee.
Second?
Do you have a dollar figure for
I
that?
believe it's $700. Is that right?
Well, you stated the motion to allow a figure to be put in, so we'll accept the motion, the full amount, and staff can,
The full amount.
if you're comfortable with that.
That's fine. I mean, it's my understanding it's $700. Is that about right?
I'll
Okay.
second that.
We'll have Ms. Donaldson do
The
the way
actual-
you stated the motion, the full amount.
Sure.
And we had a second to that, correct? Councilman Spencer, I believe. Any discussion on that motion?
Sure. I think
Councilman
it's
Hensley.
an absolute shame what we just did to these folks. I think we should work together over the next couple of weeks and find a nay vote who is willing to reconsider the equities of the situation. And in the meantime, we should give them their money back. I'm sorry, folks.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, we're going to do a roll call on that as well. Ms. Donaldson?
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
No.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer,
Aye.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon. Passes.
All right, the motion passes, so we'll ask city staff to get the appropriate number and take care of that, and thank you, Councilman. Thank you for being here.
Mayor?
I'm sorry?
I would just
Coun-
like to, again, address staff regarding the striping on the entrance of that alley. I mean, with the concerns of the public safety of this area, I think that those need to be striped per code to alleviate any sight distractions coming out of there with emergency vehicles. Well, I'm just surprised it hasn't been done, being that this is elevated to this level.
Yeah, and we
Mr.
can
Morris.
review it, certainly, to see what it would take.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right,
Just
go ahead.
on the, if it's longer than the normal that's codified, excuse me, it would, it's in a no parking code, so it's a code change that comes back. Just so everybody understands that. So we have a normal, if we stripe additional no parking, take out parking spaces and stripe no parking, that's in the code as well.
Although there may be some certain situations that apply to this specific situation, but we'll look at it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Because I know, I mean, I was having issues with my driveway and people parking across my driveway. And this was prior to me being on the council, but when I called about it, I was told, well, we can come and stripe either side of your driveway so many feet, you know, to prevent parking, you know. I was just wondering if this area is doing that, being that this is an emergency exit that we're being told, you know, is high priority. So,
Mr. Milne. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little jumpy at this point. So. All right. I think that takes care of item number 5. Let's go to item 6, appointments by the mayor. You have a list of 5 names here.
Thank you. So we have 4 reappointments to the Board of Adjustment. They are Jim Crabtree, Adam Cartwright, Roy Michael, and Michael Eichner. And then we have 1 new appointment of Troy Pinkerton to the Police Personnel Board.
Okay. Any comments on the names? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Jumps us to item 7. 7A, Housing Needs Assessment Consultant Presentation. Ms. Senzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In 2021, the city utilized community development block grant funds and CARES Act funding to conduct a housing needs assessment. The purpose of that housing needs assessment was to get a pulse, if you will, on the community in regards to housing in Jefferson City and Cole County. We also knew that we were getting $7.3 million in disaster recovery funds stemming from the 2019 tornado, and we wanted to know where best to invest those dollars to have the greatest impact for housing recovery in the city. RKG Associates was selected through a competitive bid process and is a great match for this project. Through their specialization in economic planning and real estate consultancy. Planning and Protective Services staff worked with RKG along with numerous nonprofits in the community, the Chamber of Commerce, and other local housing developers to provide the data for our consultants. At this time, our consultants from RKG are going to present the housing needs assessment and then allow for questions and answers afterwards. At this time, I'd like to introduce Eric Halverson and Eric Woisey-Jess with RKG.
Welcome. Can you hear us okay?
We can. Can you hear us?
We can. We're going to turn it over to you, and thanks again for being with us tonight.
Great. Thanks for having us. We do have a presentation prepared that Eric's going to share. Okay. Is that coming up for you all?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks for having us. My name is Eric Halverson. I'm a principal with RKG Associates. RKG, just as background, we're a planning, real estate, and economic development consultant firm. We have offices in Boston, Massachusetts, Dallas, Texas, Alexandria, Virginia, and down in Georgia. We've been in business since 1982 and work all over the country doing a lot of housing work for communities of a lot of different sizes. So we're thrilled to come and be able to help Jefferson City sort of assess the housing market here, identify potential housing needs, and some strategies going forward for how the city might be able to address both housing opportunities as well as potential housing issues. Now you want to go to the next slide here? Great, so we have about a 25-minute or so presentation, hoping to leave plenty of time for questions from the council if there are any. We'll go over some key trends. Eric's going to give a pretty thorough data overview. I'll come back and talk about gaps and opportunities, and we'll finish up with strategies. We're really giving you all a highlight of what's in the much more detailed report. Hopefully you all have had a chance to flip through that. That includes a lot more data and information than what we'll have time to present tonight. We're going to try and hit the highlights and try to quickly tell the story from a housing perspective of Jefferson City. So Eric, would you like to take over?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm hearing a little feedback, so pardon me for 1 second. Everyone hear me okay? Hello? Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, sorry about that. I was getting feedback. So before I jump into the data dive, I'm going to provide some key trends as a broad overview, which I will return to throughout the data slides. So here are some of the 6 key findings from the report. The first being that older millennials and older adults are driving population growth. The housing stock is aging, particularly among rental units. And single-family homes dominate housing stock. There's a tight supply of rental housing across price points. Fourth, home prices and rents have increased over the last decade, driven by supply constraints. Fifth, most workers in Jefferson City commute from surrounding communities. And then sixth, housing gaps exist at the low and high income ranges. So as I go through the data slides, I'm going to continually return to these 6 points just to kind of show how these broader trends speak to the narrative of the Jefferson City housing market. So
Could I interrupt you just a second?
Data slides.
Could I interrupt you
So,
just a second?
The first being the older millennial and older adults are driving population housing growth. Despite the slowdown in growth over the recent decade, historically Jefferson City has been a growing city since 1970. As we look closer at the housing market in Jefferson City, one of the contributing factors to the slowdown in population growth is the result of a limited supply of housing and changing housing preferences. These can be linked to changes in
You're gone. We can't hear you any longer, if you can hear us.
Sorry, I thought you wanted Eric to stop, so I just told him real quick.
Is everything okay on your end, counselors?
Yeah, it's just a little muffled. If he could just speak up. But yeah, he can proceed on.
Sorry, we're just getting a really, really bad echo on our end from maybe from the room that you're in.
Mute the WebEx on your end.
Yeah, we're checking one of the mics in the room, but you can go ahead and proceed on.
Did you last the data or the key trend?
You can go from where you're at.
Just start this portion again.
Yeah, that's fine.
The first key trend that I mentioned previously was that older millennial and older adult households are driving population growth. As you can see on the figure on the right, despite the slowdown in growth over the recent decade, historically Jefferson City has been a growing city since 1970. Housing market in Jefferson City. One of the factors to the slowdown in population growth is the result of a limited supply of housing, which changes in age structure and employment opportunities. Structure, as you can see in the figure on the right, population has seen increases in older millennials, which are those who fall in that 35 to 44 age bracket, and in older adults, which are ages 65 and older. Of these changes in age structure is a diverging set of housing demands. Older millennials in that 35 to 44 age bracket typically drive demand for single-family homes as they start families or reach higher earnings. Older adult households may be looking to downsize or find more price-appropriate housing based on accessibility needs, maintenance, or living on a fixed income. Change in households by size and tenure. Tenure referring to whether someone rents or owns their home. The figure on the right illustrates that the city saw increases in renters aged 15 to 34 and decreases in homeowners ages 25 to 34 and 45 to 64. Changes in total population. in households suggests that net increases in older adult owner households are aging in place. Indicates that with the net increases in renter households, 25 to 44, and net decreases in owner households, 25 to 44, opportunities to free up owner housing from households 65 and older by offering rental options that many of these households may be interested in to downsizing to. Leads to low vacancy rates and price increases in the ownership market. Key trend, the housing stock is aging, particularly among rental units. I'd highlight the ACS estimates for residential structure age for both owner and renter units. Indicates that 53% of owner-occupied units and 59% of renter-occupied units were built prior to 1980. The housing stock is over 40 years old. Associated with an older housing stock can include rehabilitation costs, weatherization, maintenance, and accessibility. This is that households coming with higher incomes and more borrowing power can afford to purchase a home and renovate it. Households may have difficulty keeping up with maintenance. So distribution of the city's housing stock by age using the county assessment data. The newest residential developments have occurred at the city's edges and in the suburbs, while the city center are much older. Coupled with the ACS data on households, we know that most of the city's lowest income households, who are primarily consistent of renters, reside in these neighborhoods with higher concentrations of older homes. Rising housing costs, coupled with an aging housing stock, places additional costs and risks to these households. Unit breakdown and housing typology mix. I turn now to the third key trend. Majority of Jefferson City's housing stock is single family, but rental units have a very tight vacancy rate. The unit breakdown for renter and owner-occupied units. Over 93% of owner-occupied units are single family. Structures hold the highest percentage. Shows is that there are not many large-scale rental buildings with more than 20 units in Jefferson City. Residential building types. With very low vacancy and rising prices, adding more units in appropriate locations could provide some relief. And in the right locations could also make good use of limited land within the city's boundaries. Rates, which looks at all the available for rent and for sale units at a percent of the total available housing stock. Jefferson City has had historically low vacancy rates since 2017, but an important note I want to highlight with this figure is the margin of error highlighted in the light blue. Run to 2020 have not yet fully captured the impacts of the tornado or the historically low inventories and high prices that occurred through 2021 into 2022. Benchmark from stakeholder interviews and anecdotal on-the-ground information, we heard that vacancy rates throughout the city are most likely much lower than the 5.2% captured in 2020. Vacancy rates is that it could mean that the availability of housing throughout the city remains relatively low, leaving few options for renters and home buyers, those who cannot afford increasing rents or rising home prices. Increased constraints on labor market mobility. Breakdown to housing supply. The figure on the right highlights the residential housing pipeline from 2015 to 2021 as provided by the city. The residential permitting data shows that the majority of permitting has been for single-family units over the last 5 years. Throughout the city, supply of housing for both owner-renter households has not kept pace with the population and household change. Furthermore, the impacts of the tornado and exceptionally old housing stock has removed some housing units. led to a low housing availability and continually rising housing costs. On the impacts of the tornado on the city's housing stock. The city's 2040 comprehensive plan, the city lost roughly 152 housing units, some of which were rental units. By parcel data, we also found that some 890 parcels along the tornado path reported property damage. And in the map on the right, looking at those parcels with the X hashed symbology. Approximately 4,056 units. Damaged by or lost to the tornado. Some of the indirect consequences include unrepaired damage to a number of these units, which could greatly affect the livability of these properties. To be demolished or those that remain in disrepair have the effect of removing housing units from the market. Home prices and rents have increased over the last decade. Values and asking rents have increased throughout Jefferson City. Broader regional housing trends. Housing costs exacerbate cost burden for lower income households. Additional financial burden on some households who may have to choose between paying for housing and affording other needs such as health care, education, childcare, food, or transportation. Often the lack of new housing options may also serve as a deterrent for workers to live in the city. Over the last decade, median gross rent has increased by 18.5%, $2 a month. Experience cost burdening at much higher levels than owner households. Rents rise over time, squeezing household incomes even further. Also have an impact on lower wage workers who could live and work in the city. Employers to find workers over time. Most of Jefferson City's labor force commutes from the surrounding area. Indicate that in 2019, almost 32,000 workers commuted to the city each day. The city's role as a regional employment center, which serves as an opportunity for the city. Increasing the diversity of housing options from affordable units to market rate rentals and single family homes may attract and allow for more workers of these workers to live in the city closer to their employment. Businesses add spending power within the city and reduce housing and transportation costs for these households. These worker inflows, you can see that there is a large inflow of workers each week from the surrounding counties. A captive market for housing in Jefferson City. These workers are not living in Jefferson City today could be an important first step to tailoring housing options and community amenities towards capturing a larger share of non-resident workers. Last key trend, I want to take a brief aside to provide an overview of how we frame affordability within the study. Affordable housing is defined as housing that costs no more than 30% of a household's income. Benchmark offers a good starting point, but it should be recognized that some households may choose to spend more or less on housing based on other factors such as proximity to work, school districts, or a preference for certain types of housing. With that in mind, what is considered affordable is determined by both household incomes and in a given market. Regarding the 30% affordability benchmark is that while it serves as a great starting point, as previously mentioned, whether a household spends a little above or below 30% of its income, it may still face challenges of unaffordable housing. Their household incomes to the area median income is about relative differences in household incomes across a given market. Income. Area median income refers to the midpoint of a region's income distribution, where half the households in a region earn more than the median and half earn less than the median. AMI thresholds for area median income, households eligible to live in income restricted housing units, and how much those units can be rented or sold for. Right, they highlight how households in Jefferson City can be broken down by the ratio of income to area median income. I want to draw your attention to the red dotted boxes. Red dotted boxes show that about 46% of renter households, of owner households, earn less than 50% of the area median income, being $34,550. 4,579 households that fall below that 50% threshold. Of course, on this slide, we provided a couple of common jobs in Jefferson City and provide the median annual income for those jobs. Many of these jobs, they earn less than the city's median household income and fall below the area median income. Home values have exceeded what is affordable for the median worker in many of these cities, highest employed occupations. Translate across the market. Have housing gaps at the low and high income price points, the orange bars. Comparing incomes for renter and owner households to housing costs, very low and very high incomes may not be finding housing that matches their needs or desires. In the city, priced to households 50 to 80% of AMI, with the green bars, you squeezed in the middle, driving up prices for low and moderate income households. That increasing housing options for higher income households, such as more single family, could alleviate competition for the more affordable housing units in the market. It means that there's a great need for more affordable rental units priced to households at 30% of AMI or below. Eric, I want to close the data overview section and speaking a little about how housing can serve as a key economic driver. The goal for economic development starts with the preservation of housing that is affordable for local residents. Economic mobility for residents because it allows households to improve savings, build wealth, and remain close to key job markets and opportunity. The labor markets because a lack of availability and consistent unaffordability of housing prevents labor mobility, which ultimately affects the local economy. The local workforce can reduce the cost to employers who have to pay for workers that commute from far away, and increase residents working in the community, boosts local spending. Business surveys regarding executives' top site selection criteria have continually cited quality of life and availability of skilled workforce as a key factor, meaning housing as a priority for residents is also a priority for economic development. So with that in mind, I will turn it to Eric to discuss the economic.
Now that we've had a chance to review some of the most pertinent housing data for Jefferson City, we wanted to talk a little bit about the housing gaps and opportunities. Next. So first we'll start with some of the housing gaps. Based on our data analysis and also our interviews with local stakeholders, we sort of distilled this down into 5 areas the city could focus on to help improve the housing situation for residents. The first is the need for more housing in general, which Eric has started to talk about, but in particular rental housing. As discussed earlier, the vacancy rate for rental housing is really tight. There hasn't been a lot built recently, and we also know the tornado had a major impact on many rental units in the area that may have been hit or impacted by that tornado coming through. In addition to the need for new housing, there is a need to improve the condition of existing units probably with a focus on those units in structures constructed prior to 1980, and also finding ways to increase the number of accessible features in both existing and new construction, with the idea of helping older adults as well as residents with disabilities. And as Jefferson City's population continues to age and also age in place, the need and the desire for accessibility features in those units will likely grow over time. There's a need for housing at several different income levels in Jefferson City, as Eric discussed, including market rate ownership units as well as rental units. So as construction of new units has slowed a bit over time, it's also forcing households of all incomes to end up competing for existing units sort of priced in the middle of the market. And this means that upper income households who could potentially afford a bit more in rent or a slightly higher sales price end up competing with units basically with households at 50 to 100% of AMI. This can often create a situation where lower income households are priced out of the market, or they might have to pay more than what they technically can afford. And last, to add more housing to the city, you may want to consider looking at adding more allowable residential structure types in some of the neighborhoods, such as the integration of duplexes, triplexes, or maybe small apartment buildings to create units in a way that doesn't necessarily fundamentally change the aesthetics of the buildings in a particular neighborhood. Keeping single-family homes in these neighborhoods we know is an important goal, but there could also be some opportunities to add new housing types that might end up providing a different unit mix, maybe different unit sizes, and also different price points for other home ownership opportunities. Next. We think there's some great opportunities for implementing some of these strategies in the plan that builds upon the great work that was done as part of the city's comprehensive planning effort. In the comp plan, the city identified 3 tiers of strategically monitored neighborhoods, many of which focused on the kind of central core of the city emanating outward toward the east and the west and the south. The tier 3 areas on the edges of downtown are locations where housing rehabilitation, maybe the introduction of different housing types, increasing home ownership, and adding more housing in general could help stabilize and strengthen these areas. We know with the limited staff, of course, and limited financial resources at the city's disposal, we believe it might be prudent to focus some of these efforts on those tier 2 and tier 3 neighborhoods, maybe first trying to address some of the housing issues and also add new housing options around the downtown area. And now we'll talk briefly about a couple of the key strategy ideas for Jefferson City, noting that the report has a lot more information and some additional strategies, but we wanted to focus on a couple of the key ones. So in the report, you'll notice that we use categories to help organize the strategies, which focus on 4 different topics. We have strategies to increase housing supply, ones to help with housing rehabilitation and preservation, strategies to help boost home ownership, and strategies to provide assistance to both homeowners and renters in the city. And tonight we'll just highlight a few of those impactful strategies that we think can make a difference in the short term for the city and its residents. The first strategy that we'd like to highlight is one we think could be done internally with existing staff and wouldn't necessarily require a lot of expenditure of funds on the city's behalf. Having staff take a look at the existing zoning and the zoning districts to see perhaps if any districts or the regulations within the districts could be updated to allow more housing types by right. Also to potentially reduce any barriers that might exist that could preclude housing from being built, and maybe any process-related issues that could potentially slow the time it takes to go from concept to construction of housing. This assessment should look at things like use restrictions, dimensional requirements, open space requirements, height, maybe lot area requirements, and parking to make sure that as many hurdles to constructing housing are removed, where reasonable and where possible. This may be particularly effective closer to downtown, where one might anticipate a wider range of housing options, maybe compared to the edges of the city where more suburban or rural development patterns might be expected. The second strategy is along a similar line to the first one, but kind of after the review of zoning, the city may want to look at ways to actually encourage what is termed missing middle housing. These are housing types that used to be very common in place in a lot of communities decades ago, but have been zoned out of a lot of neighborhoods for a variety of reasons. These structures might house, say, 2 to 4 units in a smaller building, or they might even be a smaller 4 to 10 unit apartment building. And in places where those buildings are designed properly, the structure should not be incongruent with the design of buildings that already exist in the neighborhood. Some cities around the country are trying to integrate these designs into neighborhoods by providing a density bonus or looking at pre-approved design plans for several different building models that the developer or maybe even a property owner could come in and build by filing permits since the designs are already pre-approved. The city could also potentially tie affordability restrictions to some of the units in exchange for pre-permitted designs, maybe higher intensity or requiring a sort of less arduous process. As the city is looking to encourage additional housing options, there may be opportunities to partner with local employers through what's termed as sort of a workforce housing fund. Employer-assisted housing programs can provide an option for employers to end up helping their employees with the cost of owning or renting a house through maybe a buy-down subsidy. In markets where housing is needed or prices are really high, employers are often willing to come to the table as a partner and offer funding to subsidize units or new developments if they can ensure that some of their employees at least would be able to live and remain in the city close to work. Jefferson City could be a great partner alongside large employers by offering maybe city-owned land for building housing, potentially assist with a down payment program or a rent subsidy, or maybe even help connect area employers to developers who are interested in partnering on the construction of new housing. Alongside the Workforce Housing Fund, the city could also look at expanding its first-time homebuyer program. A down payment is often cited as one of the biggest barriers to home ownership, particularly in the face of rapidly rising purchase prices and also escalating interest rates. Having that down payment program can really help buyers secure a competitive bid on a home and also a loan through a bank. The city currently offers $5,000 to first-time home buyers through its Community Development Block Grant program, but the assistance is first come, first serve, and the program does have a funding limit. As part of the study, we did look at the percentage of current renters with household incomes between 31 and 50% of AMI, and what percentage of homes that group of renters could actually afford to purchase. With the $5,000 down payment assistance, those households could afford without that $5,000 down payment assistance, those households could afford about 36% of all homes in Jefferson City. With the down payment assistance, that percentage could increase to about 55% of all homes, opening up some of those lower to middle income households to a much broader swath of the market. As the city is putting together these programs and also encouraging more housing investment to occur, it might be a great opportunity to market housing alongside economic development, maybe as a recruiting tool for new businesses. The city has a history of providing these programs for home buyers, for renters, assisting developers, and with an added emphasis on housing, we think this could be a great time to market these efforts to attract new businesses to the city. If the city is thinking about purchasing marketing spots in magazines, online outlets, site selection materials, it might also consider promoting housing as sort of as part of the economic development package. We know from a lot of our work that today's employers, as well as the employees, are considering housing affordability, availability, and also the quality of life in their decisions about where to locate, where to live, and also where to work. Jefferson City already offers a pretty price competitive housing stock, and with new investments in housing, it could provide a real good marketing edge for the future. The city also has a lot of existing units in older, more established neighborhoods, particularly those neighborhoods just outside the downtown that have been identified as strategically monitored. These locations have some of the oldest housing stock, some of the lowest values, and also far more investor-owned housing than in the newer edge neighborhoods. The city already has some rehab programs for existing housing in place. But the funding could potentially be expanded to help more homeowners over time. The program could also be expanded to provide assistance to landlords who may have older problem properties that need to be brought up to a higher quality standard for their tenants. The city could also, as they're thinking about the rehab program, could consider a tiered repayment program that we've seen work in some other communities, where, say, homeowners below a certain income threshold are provided with forgivable rehab funds if they remain in the home for a certain period of time, while maybe higher income households or investor-owned properties might be required to repay some or all of those funds over time to ensure that that rehab fund is sort of continually capitalized. And finally, or if you can go back one, finally, we developed can you go to the landlord slide? Thanks. I think you may have skipped ahead. We worked on a strategy around creating a partnership program with landlords in the city to help educate landlords on their role with housing. This could include things like knowing the rules and regulations around tenant screening, affordability restrictions and monitoring, accepting housing vouchers, support services for settling tenant grievances and complaints, maintaining the units and property, and more. Creating a really good working relationship with landlords in the city could help improve the lives of both tenants, the neighborhood as a whole, and also alleviate issues that a landlord might run into with the city should they not follow the rules. Programs like this might be targeted specifically in those strategically monitored neighborhoods, which we know already have a much higher rate of investor-owned rental housing than might be found in other parts of the city. So that concludes our sort of overview presentation. Again, the report has a lot more information, also has additional strategies. We want to really thank you for the opportunity to conduct this study, to work with the city and the staff and everyone involved, and also to be able to present, sort of a swath of this information to you tonight. We're happy to try and answer any questions that you might have, and thank you again.
Well, thanks to both of you for joining with us. Obviously a very high-level presentation and discussion of a very complicated document, so thank you. I know we've taken a lot of time. We've got a lot on the agenda, but I did want to open it up if people have questions. While you have two of the consultants here, we will do that. So, any comments, questions? Ms. Senzi, any wrap-up comments that you want to make, or any?
No, just the kind of next step is circling up with our nonprofit partners and JC Rep and the Chamber and start trying to implement some of the measures that were identified is kind of the next step from here.
Thanks. I think there's some exciting opportunities in that report. All right. You guys must have done a great job. I don't see any questions around the table right now, so and we've got a lot of work to do to dig into this report and a lot of issues in the community, so we appreciate your work. I think this sets out a roadmap for us that now we need to figure out how we go about implementing the appropriate sections. So thank you very much.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
If you would just hang on,
Thank
we're
you.
just going to ask real quick if there's any questions from the public on the report. Okay, I think we're good to go for tonight. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you again.
That takes us to item 7B, Capitol Avenue update. I think Mr. Melman, you were going to give us a quick update.
Yeah, so last Friday, I distributed to the City Council what we're calling our first round of structural assessments regarding many of the properties up on Capitol Avenue. We're kind of taking these in two tranches, and what was distributed to the City Council last week was our first tranche. The second group that we're going to be getting structural assessments on, the engineers have said that should be available to the city no later than September 30th. That they're working diligently on it, but that is the original deadline that we had in there. So we're not behind or anything like that. Just want to give everyone a heads up. We are diligently working on making these assessments available to the public. I believe we're going to attempt to put them up on the website, and then reach out to those people that have reached out to the city, indicating their interest in the project, and whether it's passing interest and curiosity, or someone who's a serious investor. We're taking all names and taking that down into a contact list, and these assessments will be distributed to them as well. So what are we supposed to do with them? Well, According to the plan that was approved by the City Council earlier this summer, once the City Council gets the structural assessments and the consultants will be at the City Council meeting as of right now, and the second meeting in October on the 17th to answer questions and give a brief presentation on the assessments. We believe that the City Council will have all the information that staff has been asked to provide it in order to make a determination on which of the buildings need to be demolished and which ones will be held out for potential redevelopment opportunities. And so if there's any that the City Council sees that says, okay, there's not much merit in holding this out for a redevelopment, we need to get the property down because it's, presenting a detriment to the neighborhood and is dangerous, the city will be able to proceed with demolitions pretty quickly thereafter once the City Council makes that determination. If there's any in the list that the City Council wants to hold out and not demolish and make available for, I believe we called it a call for interested parties, then we will make that call, and we're thinking that we would hold open that period for 4 to 6 weeks. If the City Council recalls, the plan is to have people that are interested in potentially redeveloping the property, doing two things. One would be to enter into a bid guarantee agreement, which basically states that if the City Council were to acquire the property and put it out for public bid, that they guarantee that they will make a bid for the property. So that way we're not in a situation where we have held off on demolition and acquired a property at greater expense and then have no one that would bid on the property. The second thing that the plan calls for is that those people who are want to enter into the bid guarantee agreement provide some financial backing in the form of an escrow that would be refundable in the event that their redevelopment proposal is not selected by the City Council. That escrow would be the greater of $5,000 or 1% of the rehabilitation costs identified by the consultant. And so, once those come in, then we can kind of go through the redevelopment process, fairly typical. If none come in, if there are no interested parties who are willing to fulfill those requirements, then the structures would be subject to demolition then. So that's a pretty drawn out process. What we're looking at for short-term time frame, once again, second round of structural assessments are due by September 30th. We expect that the consultants will be here at the City Council on October 17th. And then the City Council really needs to make a decision probably no later than January 6th on which properties needed to be demolished, either one, none, all, or any, because our pricing on the demolition contracts expire on January 6th. So it's not that we still can't get them down, we'll just have to renegotiate prices likely. So in the short term, that's kind of what we're looking at, but we're encouraged to go through the process and figure out where the East Capitol Avenue area is going to go from here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions? Councilman Lester.
Just when do you anticipate providing this information out on the website?
We are trying to get it out today. We're hoping no later than tomorrow.
Thanks for the report. I know you sent us a fairly lengthy document. I started going through it, so light reading but you have a month, so you've got a little bit ahead time before the quiz. But I appreciate all the work that's been done. We've made a lot of progress in calendar year 22, and I appreciate the work. Council has been very supportive in trying to put the pieces in place, and I think that's a positive. The community has been very engaged, so I think that's a positive. So appreciate all the work and look forward as we move forward. All right, that takes us to item 8, announcements by mayor, council, or staff. We do have some committees listed there. Admin, any updates?
Our next scheduled meeting is October 5th at 7:30 a.m. I think it's across the hall.
Thank you. Finance?
We will not have our September meeting, which would have been this Thursday morning, the 22nd at 7:30. We will, Budget Committee will meet this Thursday evening at 5:30 p.m. as well as potentially next Monday evening and Thursday next week. Thank you.
All right, Public Works, we have met for September. Our next meeting will be October 13th at 7:30 a.m., probably in this room. And then, Mr. Sanders, you were just going to update us real quick on Campo Board of Directors.
Thank you. Yes. The Campo Board of Directors meeting is this Wednesday across the hall in the Boone Bancroft building at noon. Of interest are two MoDOT project managers going to come and talk about two projects that are currently in their STIP, which is a funded program list of projects. One is along US 50 and Truman Boulevard, that whole interchange. They're scoping it out to see what sort of issues there are and what the solutions may be. And the other one is along the highway bridge going across the Missouri River, which is important to everybody, some lane additions and possible changes of access to the highway. It's going to be presented. It will be available virtually also. Thank you.
And council members may want to sit in on that discussion. I know we had some discussion at the Airport Advisory Committee. I'm thinking the wrong meeting. Yeah, at the Airport Advisory, based on some other discussions. So there was a request made out of that meeting that probably will need to come back at some point. But I think we were going to wait for some additional information. But there's some fascinating proposals, but there's also some things that we're going to need to have input on. Thanks. I appreciate you bringing us up to date on that. Now, without further ado, Lincoln University. Ms. Aylesworth, thanks for joining us. I know you've got a lot going on at the university, so we'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is a very exciting week for Lincoln this week. This is HBCU Week, and this year's HBCU Week theme is Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity through HBCUs, and this is Lincoln's first ever week-long celebration as one of Missouri's HBCUs. To start our celebration for HBCU Week, we had LU Day at the Blue Tiger football game, where the proclamation declaring September 17th as Lincoln University Day was presented at the football game against Fort Hays during halftime. Today, people were able to visit the Inman E. Page Library to visit Lincolnites on the Move, Activism on Campus, which is a display by Lincoln University Archives in the Ethnic Studies Center. On Wednesday, there will be a community discussion with Dr. Darius Watson, which is co-sponsored by Lincoln University and the Missouri River Regional Library from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dr. Watson is the Executive Director of Academic Initiatives at Lincoln University, and he will moderate a discussion of Lincoln's relationship with Jefferson City and the Central Missouri region while exploring the past, present, and future of the shared commitment by Lincoln University and its surrounding communities to cooperatively advance economic and educational opportunities for all. And on Friday, we have HBCU Pride Day, and fellow Lincolnites as well as alumni can share why it's great to attend an HBCU on social media with photos and comments on social media. Follow along on Facebook at LU Blue Tigers and Instagram at LU Blue Tigers. Also on today, we held the Constitution Day event, and the annual Constitution Day celebration was at 2 p.m. in Pauley Theater. Students, faculty, and staff were asked to volunteer and read sections of the U.S. Constitution, and the Honorable Robin Ransom, judge of the Missouri Supreme Court, gave a keynote address after the reading of the Constitution. Tomorrow, on Tuesday, the 98th Miss Lincoln University of Missouri, Babari Nabian, will be traveling to Atlanta, Georgia tomorrow to compete in the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame pageant. Next on the agenda, we have the LU Farmers Market. The LU Farmers Market takes place every Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at 1219 Chestnut Street, Jefferson City, Missouri. Vendors are local and they have a diverse variety of products. If anyone is interested in becoming a new vendor, you are welcome to visit the Lincoln booth at the market, or you may email Lincoln University farmersmarket@gmail.com. And lastly, we have our homecoming celebration. Homecoming is next week from September 21st to October 1st, and there will be many fun events open to the community, such as the Gospel Explosion Concert in Richardson Auditorium on Sunday, September 25th at 7 p.m., the royal coronation of the 20th Mr. Lincoln University, Tyrese Stovall, and the 98th Ms. Lincoln University, Babari Nabian, on Thursday, September 29th in Richardson Auditorium at 7 p.m. On October 1st, the homecoming parade will take place, as well as the homecoming football game, which will be at 2 p.m. at Dwight T. Reed Stadium. If anyone is interested in registering to be in the homecoming parade, you can register by going on the Lincoln website, clicking the alumni tab, and then homecoming. And these submissions are open until September 24th, and any questions can be emailed to luhomecoming@lincolnu.edu. And that concludes my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you joining with us. Good luck on all the festivities. Item 10, presentations from the gallery on specific bills. We only had one individual signed up, Mr. Lee, and you spoke, so thank you very much. We don't have any others, so we will jump to the consent agenda. Item number 11.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Councilman. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Item 12, bills introduced, 2022-065.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for Transportation Alternative Program funds.
Mr. Moresh?
Thank you. As the clerk indicated, this is a TAP grant agreement with MoDOT, so that's a competitive grant process. The city applied for funds to work on greenway crossings of our couple busy streets on Lafayette and Southwest Boulevard, make improvements there for the pedestrian and bicycle crossings on our streets, and we're successful. The grant's a little over $220,000 and would be matched out of the half-cent capital improvement sales tax fund.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Perfect. All right. Item 15, bills pending. Bill 2022-058.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission pertaining to the roles and responsibilities for signing, installed, and maintained by the applicant as part of the J.C. Loop wayfinding project.
Back to Mr. Moresh.
Thank you. Basically, another MoDOT agreement, as the clerk indicated, but just indicates that we're allowed to install some wayfinding signing on their right of way, and then we'd have to maintain it.
All right. Comments, questions? Ms. Donaldson, you want to do the roll call?
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Deacon.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye. Thank you very much. Takes us to 2022-059.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Central Bank of Jefferson City, Missouri for banking services.
All right. I believe you're going to, Ms. Perry, you're going to give us an update on that?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
The city requested proposals from interested banking firms to establish contracts for banking services. The responses were reviewed based on the criteria and available points as stated in the RFP specifications, and the city received one response to all services in the RFP. That was Central Bank. We did have one other response from Hawthorne Bank that was considered non-responsive because they did not respond to all of the essential banking services that the city requires. And at this point, staff recommendation is to award to the best offer as received from Central Bank, and this is a 5-year banking contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. All right. Any questions, comments? Ms. Donaldson?
Kimna.
Read the roll.
Abstain.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Deacon.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
All right. That takes us to 2022. I'm sorry, we've already done that one. 2022-62.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a $233,951 agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for Metropolitan Transportation Planning Services for the period of November 1, 2022 to October 31, 2023 reflecting consolidated planning grant funds as approved in the Campo FY 2023 Unified Planning Work Program.
Mr. Sanders, I believe that is you.
Thank you. The clerk actually summed it up pretty well. The planning grant basically follows what has been determined by the Board of Directors as our work program for next year. The grant is $233,951. The fiscal impact to the city is actually in the match to the grant of the total match is $58,488, of which Jefferson City will contribute $34,491. J.C. Parks is contributing $12,500, and the remaining of the match will come from Cole County, I believe. The total program for next year for Campo is $292,439. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, comments? We have 062 before us. You want to read the roll?
Lester?
Aye.
Schreiber? Spencer?
Aye.
Spicer? Ward?
Aye.
Wiseman?
Aye.
Deacon?
Aye.
Fitzwater?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Takes us to the informal calendar, 2022-052.
We will leave that on the informal this evening.
All right.
No, as much as my neighbor here is trying to get me to bring it up for a vote, but
I tried, guys.
I'll resist the strong temptation to try to wrap that up tonight. But
Your willpower
well, we'll deal with it again on Thursday. Thank you.
your willpower will be duly noted.
I
All right.
appreciate that.
And your attempt, it will be noted also. All right, that takes us to resolutions. Resolution 2022-24, item 15A.
A resolution accepting American Rescue Plan Act funds from the Federal Transit Administration.
I believe we're back to you, Mr. Moran.
All right. Thank you. As the clerk indicated, this is an ARPA grant for transit, and it's a direct grant to transit for operating expenses, so there's no match on this. And this will complete our paperwork to process that grant.
All right, I would move approval of this.
Second.
Any comments, questions? All right, you have resolution 2022-24. Roll call vote?
Lester?
Aye.
Schreiber? Spencer?
Aye.
Spicer? Ward?
Aye.
Wiseman?
Aye.
Deacon?
Aye.
Fitzwater?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Thank you. Item B, 2022-25.
A resolution accepting grant funds from the Federal Transit Administration.
Mr. Marash.
Thank you. And this is actually kind of a collection of various grant pools to come up to the sum you see on your agenda. But again, another grant from FTA, a little over $1.5 million. Our intention, we've talked about this at the Public Works and Planning Committee meeting a few months back, is to pursue 2 hybrid type, Gillig type buses. And then in addition, the grant would also be used to replace a lift at our central maintenance facility. And this does require a match, and that would come out of the transit grant matching pool.
Okay, this one will also require a motion.
Move to accept.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions? Councilman Spencer?
The replacement buses, are they smaller or the same size of what we're replacing?
Well, it's my intention to try to order the smaller one, yes, sir. But they are still the large profile, they're just the shorter version.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Schreiber?
Aye.
Spencer?
Aye.
Spicer? Ward?
Aye.
Wiseman?
Aye.
Deacon?
Aye.
Fitzwater?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Lester?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That takes us to resolution 2022-26.
A resolution authorizing Anthem and Sun Life to provide group health insurance.
Ms. Stroke.
Thank you. So this authorizes an agreement with Anthem and Sun Life to provide our group health insurance for our city employees. As you know, we are self-insured on our health insurance, Anthem will be providing the third-party administrator services, and Sun Life will provide the reinsurance services. The switch, or with Anthem, that is a switch from United Healthcare, who we've been with for quite a while. We have been using Sun Life for the last couple of years, I believe, for our reinsurance. If this is approved tonight, then we will work with Anthem on the specifics of each of the plans, but we do anticipate continuing to have 3 options for our employees to choose from, an HSA plan and then 2 PPO plans with different options as to whether or not they'd like lower premiums and higher copays and deductibles, or higher premiums and lower copays and deductibles. So it'll gives the employees and their families some choices that best meet their needs. Cassie Limley and Randy Lucanati with Wall Street are here this evening. So if you have any questions, they'd be happy to also answer any questions.
All right, if we could get a motion to get it on the table, and then we'll see if there's any questions.
I'll make a motion.
We got a motion and a second. Councilman Kimna moved, and Councilman Spicer seconded. Now, any questions or any questions of our guests? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer,
Aye.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber.
Aye.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 2022, Resolution 2022-27.
A resolution authorizing principal for group vision insurance.
Ms. Stroop, sorry.
No problem. Okay, as mentioned, this authorizes an agreement with Principal for our group vision insurance for our city employees and their families. We have been offering vision insurance for many years. The last number of years it has been with Sun Life. Our renewal from them came in at about 21%, but Principal came back with a match. Basically, they are matching our current plan, uses the same network, and matching the current rates. We also do have our dental with Principal, so it's not a completely new company. It just means we'll have dental and vision with them if this is approved. And again, our friends at Wall Street are here if you have any questions for them.
All right, do we have a motion to get it on the table?
So moved.
Thank you very much.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any questions of Ms. Stroop or our advisors? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Spicer,
Aye.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you. That takes us to item E, Resolution 2022-28.
A resolution authorizing Sun Life Financial for basic supplemental and dependent life, AD&D, long-term disability, accident, hospital indemnity, and critical illness insurances.
One more time, we're going to come back to you, Ms. Stroop.
Okay, final one. So this authorizes a renewal actually with Sun Life for the ancillary products that Emily mentioned. It is everything that we've had with Sun Life except for vision. And they are matching the rates on all of them except for the long-term disability, which will be going up a little, and also is increasing the maximum benefit a little bit. The total fiscal impact is about $5,000 per year, and that is total across citywide.
All right.
Make a motion to.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second. Any comments, questions? All right, do a roll call vote.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Spencer,
Aye.
Spicer.
All right, thank you. Takes us to item 16, presentations from the gallery. All right, we're jumping to item 17, council and staff discussion on presentation topics. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Item 18, new business. I don't believe we have any.
I'll make a motion to approve the closed sessions.
Thank you, Roy. Man. We're already in the over, so you don't have to.
I was just.
All right, we have a motion. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Second.
All in favor? We-
Ready, roll call.
Sorry, we need a roll call on to approve the minutes. So.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Deacon,
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer. Ward.
Aye.
All right, seeing no unfinished business.
Oh, I
Councilman-
moved to adjourn. I'm sorry. I got lost. I
We have
thought
a
we were
motion
doing
and a
budget
second.
next.
So anybody that took the over was successful tonight.
All right.
Thank you very much.